In the last 32 years of being an international ferry pilot, I've made over 100 ocean crossings, and most of those were in single engine aircraft. So, as you can imagine, ditching in the ocean is my number one concern when I'm ferrying a plane. Well, getting food poisoning in Karachi is number one, but ditching is definitely a close second. And it's not an irrational fear. Back when I started in the early 90s, we were losing 3 pilots a year into the North Atlantic alone. And the company that I started working for, Orient Air, had lost 2 pilots in the preceding 2 years just before I started. And once I started ferry flying, I knew a lot of guys that went into the water and didn't come back. And I was fortunate enough to meet a couple of guys that ditched and survived. I met one of them one time while I was in St. John's getting ready for a flight to the Azores. Some young pilot had come up to me and asked me if I was taking the northern route. And the northern route is basically going from St. John's up to Greenland or Iceland, or maybe go up to Goose Bay or Calumet, basically up over the North Atlantic. And it's never really a great idea in the wintertime for a number of reasons. Number one, it's super cold, even on the ground. I mean, planes freeze, engines are hard to start, batteries get drained, de-icing is really expensive, prop cables freeze. So just being on the ground is a problem in the North Atlantic in the wintertime. But the biggest concern is icing when you're in the air in the North Atlantic. I mean, you run into some serious icing problems, and that's what kills a lot of pilots. So definitely, I'm not saying I've never done the northern route in the wintertime, but I try to avoid it. So when this young pilot asked me about it, I said no, not like that moron last month, because a pilot just the month prior to that I'd heard, ditched a Mooney halfway between St. John's and Iceland. And as soon as I said that, I heard a voice behind me go, "And what moron would that be?" Looked over my shoulder, and there's another pilot sitting on the back of this couch. I go, "Suppose that was you?" It goes, "Yeah." And I like felt pretty crappy about that, but he was cool about it and came over and we started talking and told me the story about what happened. Apparently, he had left St. John's en route to Reykjavik with the owner in a Mooney, and after they'd been flying about 3 hours, the oil pressure started dropping. They were losing oil someplace. Cylinder head temps started coming up. They called a mayday, turned back to St. John's, but it didn't make any difference. Shortly after that, their engine smoke started coming out of the engine, started making a real squealing noise. And says as soon as he started seeing some flames start flickering under the cowling, he shut her down and dove through the clouds and ditched it in the ocean. And luckily for them, it was a nice calm day. The Moonies retract, so they kept the gear up, slid on their belly, did such a nice job they were able to open the door, step out onto the wing, inflate the raft, and climb into it without even getting their socks wet, he said. So they climb in there, zip the cover up, and at that point they activated their ELT. Remember, this is back in probably 1992, and we didn't have the cool little EPIRBs that we have now that are all based off satellites. We would actually fly with ELTs taken out of airplanes, which are better than nothing, but not really good. So he turned it on. It didn't seem to be working. He opened it up and he said the case was cracked and the batteries had all leaked battery acid over everything. So the ELT had been carried around for the past 6 months was junk. So they were kind of in a pickle. Didn't know how anybody was going to find them, but when they got their Mayday out, they'd given a pretty accurate GPS position report because they had one of the brand new handheld GPSs back then. And within the hour, they heard an engine. They opened the zipper up, and here comes Canadian Air Force C-130 flying right for them. They were like, "Woo! All right, they've been found." They're sitting there waving. C-130 made a pass over them, dropped a line of flares, dropped it a little too accurately. He told me, he said one of the flares drifted so close to the raft they had to push it away with one of their oars. Made a second pass and dropped what appeared to be one or two torpedoes in the water. They didn't know what that was, so they didn't do anything about it. Found out later that there were two 16, 20-man life rafts or something like that and had everything but a minibar in it. So they would have been a lot more comfortable if they'd have been able to get those, but they didn't. And they sat there waving at the C-130 and watching it fly around and around. And they realized, a C-130 is not a seaplane. It's not going to land. And we're getting kind of cold because, again, this was probably December in the North Atlantic. So they went to zip the cover back up on the raft to try to get warm. And that's when they realized that they made kind of a big mistake because with all the sea spray covering the raft, the zipper had gotten iced up and they were unable to close it. Now they were stuck in their raft with the zipper open and they got really cold. They were also wearing really crappy survival suits, kind of the really thin kind that don't have integrated boots and the gloves. Now, luckily, they were rescued by a Canadian fishing boat only 8 hours later. It happened to be really close to them, and 8 hours is very close in ocean terms with boats because boats are slow. And they hauled them aboard and took them back to St. John. So that was the story it told me. It's pretty good. I put it in my book, Ferry Pilot. It was one of the best stories I'd heard about ditching. But I've really thought a lot about ditching after that, and even to this day, I'm still modifying my ditching procedures and the stuff that I carry with me. And thought I'd share it with you guys and tell you my thoughts on ditching an airplane in the ocean. Well, when you're getting ready to ditch an airplane, you have to get the cockpit ready. And that takes a little time. So that's why whenever I'm flying over the ocean, I always fly as high as I can. That way, if I have a problem, I've got time to get ready to ditch. And the first thing you need to do is get out a Mayday and a current position report. Don't let them rely on your hours old position report. Tell them exactly where you are, because if they don't know where to look, they're never going to find you. Next, you got to get your survival gear and your raft situated in the plane such that when you impact the water, they don't go flying around out of your reach. The impact's going to be pretty violent, so you need to have them secured next to you so you can find them when you're upside down, sinking in the water at night, throwing a couple of 50-foot waves, and can be challenging. Next, you got to get your survival suit zipped up, get it on and zipped up all the way. Next, after that, you want to get your seatbelt and your shoulder harness on as tight as possible. Like I mentioned, the impact's going to be pretty violent. You want everything to be as tight as possible. And lastly, you want to crack the door open. That way, if the airframe gets distorted in the impact, the door won't jam shut and trap you inside as the plane's sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic. And once you've got the cockpit all set, now you have to set up for landing. Now, normally when you land a plane, you want to land into the wind to reduce your ground speed. In this case, of course, it would be water speed. But when you're landing in the ocean, it's much more important to land in such a way that you don't flip over. You want to land with the swells. Now, if you take a look at this page out of the Queen Air manual that I've got, you'll see that they give you two options. You can land perpendicular to the swells and try to time it so you land on the back side of a swell and surf down the swell. That would be great if you could pull it off, but good luck. If you undershoot or overshoot, you're going to run right into the side of a wave, and that's going to hurt. What I prefer to do is the alternate method. Land perpendicular to the swells. That way, if you land on the top of the swell, down one side or the other, or in the trough, you're still going to be probably fine. Once you've picked your direction, now you're going to get ready to do the actual touchdown. You want to go to full flaps. You want to be going as slow as possible. And then as you come in, there's a couple of schools of thought how to actually touch down in the water. Number one, some people say you should stall the plane and kind of try to belly flop or pancake it in. I don't really think that's such a great idea myself. I think there's too great of a risk of stalling it and doing it too high. Because remember, over the ocean, it's really hard to gauge your height above the water. You know, your depth perception is really tough out over the open ocean. And if you stall it too high, you're going to nose it in. That's probably going to hurt. And so what I do is I land as level as possible. Some other people, they try to come in, as slow as possible with the tail down. And the problem I have with that is if your tail is the first thing to hit the water, it's going to kick that tail up and drive your nose into the water. And there's a really good chance you're going to flip over onto your back. So I personally land as level as possible with the flaps down, slow as possible. And hopefully it's not going to flip over. And the last thing you want to do is take a deep breath just before you hit the water. Because I once saw an interview of a woman who had to ditch a 182 halfway to Hawaii, and she said as soon as she touched down and nosed in, the windscreen imploded and immediately filled the cockpit full of water, and her first gasp as she hit the water was mostly water. So take a deep breath. That way, if that happens to you, you can undo your seatbelt, get the door out, grab your raft, grab your survival gear, and get out of the plane. If you're coughing water right off the bat, it's going to be tough to get out of the plane. Once you're in the water, it's time to get out of the plane with your raft and your survival gear. Remember, if you can't make it out with your raft, you might as well not even bother. Because if you are out in the open ocean in just your survival suit, you're probably going to be dead in a couple of hours, even with a good survival suit, because the water's just that cold. Now, a lot of guys crossing the Atlantic for the first time ask me, what kind of raft do I take with me? And that's easy. The biggest raft I can find. Because the bigger the raft, the more stable it is, the more comfortable you're going to be in the raft for however long you're in the raft, because it might be a while. Remember, once you're more than 100 or so miles out to sea, you're out of range of helicopter rescue because they don't have the range to come and get you. That means you're going to be waiting for a boat, and boats are slow. So if you're 500 miles out to sea, you might be in that raft for 24, 48 hours, maybe more, maybe a really long time. So you want to have a good raft. I see a lot of guys flying with these single man rafts, which are great if you're inshore and you're just waiting for somebody to come and get you in a short period of time. But if you're going to be out in the ocean for any extended period of time, I can't imagine anything worse than being in one of these single man life rafts, especially if you've got cold weather or some really big waves. It would be terrifying to be in one of these stupid little boats, little tiny life rafts in 50-foot waves, waves breaking, you're tumbling down the side of a huge mountain of water. No, I want a great big raft with a cover. Covers are essential. If you don't have a cover, that's going to be a big problem, especially in the North Atlantic because it's really cold. You know, even if you've got a survival suit on, after a number of hours, you're going to be pretty dang cold in that raft. And if you're in there for 24, 48 hours in the North Atlantic without a cover, probably not going to make it. Anyway, as far as rafts go, getting into the raft is really kind of tricky. Number one rule, first of all, is never let go of the raft. When you're exiting the plane, don't throw the raft out. Don't set it on the wing and then go back in for extra supplies. Hang on to that raft as if your life depends on it, because it does. Once you inflate the raft, do not let it go under any circumstances, no matter what, even if the winds are really light. The guys at the Icelandic Ocean Survival Center told me that once you let go of the raft, it's going to start drifting with the wind, and even if it's only 3 miles an hour, you're not going to be able to swim that fast, especially in a survival suit. So under no circumstances do you ever let go of the raft. If you need to go back into the plane and get more supplies, make sure you tie that raft to your body. Don't tie it to the plane, because once the plane starts sinking, if you can't get it undone, well, there goes your raft. If there's anybody injured in the party, have them hang on to the raft. You get in the raft first, and then you haul them in by grabbing their harness and leaning back and falling back into the raft. We did some training in Iceland, and we practiced that a lot, and it's surprising how hard it is to get into the raft. Now, most of the good rafts have a rope ladder underneath the opening. Basically, it's just a strap you can put your foot in and lever yourself up. But if you're in a raft without one of those, they're hard to get into, especially the big rafts, because the top of the raft sits a fair amount above the water, so it's kind of tough to get in. But if you've got a broken arm or something like that, that might be really, really difficult. And yeah, never cross the ocean without a raft. So trying to get out with your raft is essential. Now, I used to fly with a raft and a ditch bag. I would have the bag filled with all my signaling devices, my emergency food and water, everything I needed with me in the raft. But the more I thought about it over the years, I realized that just getting out of the plane with the raft is going to be hard enough, let alone trying to get out with a ditch bag as well. And I realized that there's only one way to ensure that I have all the stuff with me that I really need to have with me in the raft, and that is to zip it inside my survival suit. So all the gear that I really need to have, my signaling devices, my communication devices, my food, my water, that anything that I really, really want to have with me in the raft gets zipped inside my survival suit. That way I know I'm going to have it. Then the only thing I have to worry about is my raft. Now, I also have a secondary ditch bag with me. That's what I call my luxury bag. If I'm in such a situation that I can get out with two things, maybe the plane's still floating, I can get in there and take more stuff out. I'm grabbing my luxury bag. It's got extra food, extra water, all the stuff that make me comfortable for an extended period of time in the raft. There might even be a flask in there somewhere for morale, but put whatever you want in your luxury bag if you ever have to ditch. And so if you've got the plane all ready, you got the cockpit ready, you've cut out your distress signals, time to land the plane. If you do everything right, you might have successful ditching like this 310 that went down about 100 miles northeast of Hawaii a number of years ago. He got his distress call out in time that the Coast Guard was there waiting for him when he ditched, and they got this great video. Check it out.
A plane had declared emergency fuel and was estimating that they would be ditching 100 miles to the northeast of Hilo International Airport. So we rendezvoused with the aircraft and set up for a rescue for when he entered the water. We launched the RC-130 to rendezvous with the pilot and establish communications. We pre-staged our helicopter over at Hilo International Airport, so it would be standing by for the moment that he entered the water. And the Coast Guard cutter Kiska was also deployed. We wanted to fully prepare him for the ditching scenario. So how to set up his cockpit, exactly how to enter the water, and it's a very complex maneuver that he executed very successfully and was prepared for. Well, we just wanted to make sure the pilot was fully prepared for the scenario. It's not something he gets to practice very often, but because we were able to communicate with him and explain to him how best to execute the maneuver, it turned out to be a successful scenario.
Okay, here's all the stuff that I need to have with me in the raft. All this stuff gets zipped up into my little survival bag and gets tucked inside my survival suit. That way I know that I have it no matter what happens. So first of all, I got my signaling devices. Carry along a Siloom. I used to carry along marine flares, had a marine smoke bomb, and an army pencil flare set up. These things are awesome. They visible from a long ways away, and flare guns. Reason I don't usually carry this stuff around anymore is because I can't bring it home. You can't bring it back on the airliners because they don't let you board the plane with stuff that goes boom, even in your checked bag. So unless you want to leave it at your destination, can't bring it with you. Might be worth it though. The more signaling devices you have, the better. I also bring along just a good old-fashioned signal mirror. Again, I got this and the pencil flare out of my Army survival vest when I was a Huey crew chief. Nowadays, instead of a flare gun, though, I usually bring along laser pointer. This thing works really good. You can shine it in the direction of a helicopter coming to get you. Don't shine it right at them. You're going to blind the pilots. Any ships coming in, you can wave it around. At night, it's very visible. Even in the daytime, it's not too bad. So these things are key. You can bring along lots of spare batteries, zip them up in a Ziploc bag, keep them dry. Laser pointer is key. Most important thing I bring these days is my EPIRB. These things are amazing. They're waterproof, they float, satellite based. They'll tell rescuers exactly where you are, and they even tell you who you are. So that's kind of handy. I also bring along small portable handheld GPS. This is not an aviation GPS. You don't need one when you're in a raft. But I always bring these in case I get a hold of somebody. I can tell them exactly where I am, how fast I'm drifting, and in what direction. So in case I lose contact with them, they know exactly where to look for me. I also bring along a handheld radio. This is handy for talking to any planes that are coming to look for you. I don't think it works with boats or ships that are coming to look for you, and I don't have room for two radios, and a marine radio would be handy, but I just don't have the room. I'm not sure if this would work for contacting a boat. I don't know a whole lot about ships. I probably should. I just never looked into it, but this comes along with me too. These days, I also usually bring along a sat phone. A sat phone would be great. I mean, what better that you can call somebody and actually talk to them? I can call the ship that's going to come out and get me and have them bring me along a pepperoni pizza. So sat phones are key. Also bring along headlamp for obvious reasons. And then some stuff to keep me more comfortable in the raft. Bring along a number of space blankets because it's cold in the raft. I think I mentioned in another video, I've been through Iceland's ocean survival course twice. And when you're sitting in a raft in the North Atlantic, you realize even if you're in a survival suit, it's still really cold because the floors aren't insulated, and that will just suck all the heat out of you eventually. So, as the more insulation you can have between your butt and the ocean, the better. A couple of chemical hand warmers in case you need to warm stuff up to use the radio or whatever. I bring along some sealed food, help keep your energy up. Energy is key for keeping your core temperature up. I do bring along a big army bandage wrapped in duct tape. The duct tape will come in handy for who knows what, but the bandage is in case I get really injured in the ditching and I'm bleeding a lot. Have some way to stop the bleeding. Also carry along a raft patch kit, a little rubber repair kit, and some metal foil tape. Because you never know if the raft you're going to be in has its own patch kit, and might be kind of handy to have somewhere to patch a raft if it gets a hole in it. I also bring along a couple bottles of water because after being cold in the North Atlantic, one of your main concerns is going to be water. One of the things I've read a lot about ocean survival and ditching, accounts of guys that have ditched. And one of the things they always say is they wish they had some water or more water. And I'm going to bring my phone along. It's not going to be handy at all in a survival situation, but it's my phone, and I don't want to lose my phone. You can also film what you're doing, and that'll be cool too. Now, all this stuff fits in my little survival bag here. It's usually pretty plumb full with that stuff, and if I got an extra room, I'll put maybe a couple more candy bars or something in there. And all this gets zipped right inside my survival suit. That way, no matter what happens, I do this before I ditch. So no matter what happens, I get out with this stuff. Now, last year I got this vest. It's actually a fishing vest, and I kind of haven't decided if I'm going to use it or not. It might be handy, you put it on over the survival suit, and you can have all kinds of stuff in there. I'm a little hesitant to use it because getting out of the plane in a ditching situation is kind of job number one. And it might be tough to get out. The door might be jammed a little bit. There might be jagged pieces of metal, and I don't want a lot of extra stuff that can snag up on things. And this has lots of pockets that, yeah, you can put lots of neat stuff in there, but if it snags as you're getting out and make you go down with the ship, that would be bad. Jury's still out on that one. I'm going to have to do some experimenting. Yeah, I could probably go inside the suit. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Anyway, this is the stuff that I'm going to have with me in the raft no matter what. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on ditching. Now, for anybody out there, any Navy pilots or other ferry pilots have any other ideas or tricks up their sleeves, please put them in the comments below. I'm all ears. I do these videos to learn from you as well as you learn from me. I'm always open to new suggestions. You never know when that one little nugget of information is going to save your life. So please put any good comments down below in the comment section. All right. Well, thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe, support the channel, and keep your speed up.